Penta the Penguin and his son Pentarou starred in a series of Konami-made games in the 1980s and 90s and traces back to some of their earliest home games on the Famicom and MSX. However, this one-time major gaming company mascot is mostly unknown outside of Japan. In this episode, I'm going to be going into what I consider the Konami 8-bit Penguin Trilogy, Antarctic Adventure, Parodius da, and Yume Penguin Monogatari for the Nintendo Famicom. These are by no means the only games that they starred in, but these are three excellent but mostly unknown games to US gamers starring our Konami Penguin heroes Penta and Pentarou. Antarctic Adventure for Famicom was released April 22, 1985. It is a cartoon Famicom racing game starring Penta the Penguin. It was originally released on the MSX computer in 1983, but came to the Famicom in 1985. There also was a US ColecoVision release in 1984. Antarctic Adventure is a third-person perspective arcade-style racing game and represents Konami's take on Sega's Turbo arcade game and Namco's pole position. But instead of racing cars, you are a penguin who burns rubber by moving your little penguin feet skating around Antarctica towards the 10 international research stations. When you get there, they will raise the national flags of the sponsoring countries, except there are no Soviets, because they aren't there because, you know, the Cold War. No penguin pun intended. As in early 1980s racing arcade conventions, you don't have lives, but are rather out to avoid running out of time. Also, there's no continues. Failure awaits your penguin if you don't make it to the next checkpoint. I don't really understand why Penta the Penguin was doing this, but for many 1980s arcade games, the character motivation is somewhat vague at times. Controls and gameplay mechanics are accessible and fun. Pressing up on the gamepad increases your speed, and you could jump with A or B. You want to collect the fish that will jump out of the fishing holes, the flags in the ice, and avoid the holes in the ice or the seals will jump up to slow you down. The small holes make you hop on one fin, and the larger holes require you to climb out and will take more of your precious time. The flashing flags can give you a power-up in the form of a racing fin parasol like a sports car, allowing you to stay in the air longer, which is ironic because penguins also have fins on their little feet. Luckily, Penta the Penguin has pretty decent acceleration and handling, but sadly no initial D-style penguin drifting. It is a surprisingly fun and simple game, and I'm sort of surprised that Konami didn't bring this to the US, but Nintendo of America was incredibly selective on what titles got localized and released during the early days of the NES. Antarctic Adventure is a product of earlier times, but is still a good product of earlier times. It is the simple, cartoon penguin-based racing game that you didn't know that you needed. Luckily, the game was relatively popular in the early days of the Famicom, and the cartridge is relatively inexpensive and easy to find. In a form of self-parody, Konami subversively put their weird obsession with penguins and octopi out there in their early home games. In the 1980s, they were known for their creativity, cartoony graphics, and quality. Antarctic Adventure has all in icy abundance. For the next game, Konami doubled down on self-parody, and the video game world has never been the same.
母さんは今、コナミの結局南極大冒険に挑戦中。おっと母さん、南極大陸一周はどうしたの？
MSX 対応結局南極大冒険。
Konami!
Parodius da translates to It's Parodius for the Nintendo Famicom was released on November 3rd, 1990. It is a demake of the arcade game Parodius da Shinwa Kare Orawai, It's Parodius, from Myth to Laster, also from earlier in 1990. The name is a combination of parody and Gradius. The arcade game is actually a sequel to the original Parodius MSX games. This Famicom version is the first home port of the second Parodius game. Konami often played fast and loose with porting their games to various platforms, and their naming convention is often ignored if something was a reimagining, a sequel, a reboot, or a port of an earlier work. Konami basically didn't care, just wanted you to buy their games, and many Japanese gamers were ready to do just that. The Parodius series is the quintessential cute-em-up, meaning spaceship shooters with cute and fun graphics, with a light-hearted outlook on game design. Penta is one of the 4 playable heroes, including Vic Viper from Gradius, Twinbee, and Taco, an octopus. You see, Konami had a thing for octopi and penguins, and put them wherever they could. 1980s Japan was a weird place. They actually were able to squeeze a lot of the basic gameplay and graphical levels out of the very powerful arcade game and put together a pretty decent approximation of Parodius. It has a lot of the features of its arcade big brother. It doesn't have all the levels, but it has the cat ship boss and the giant dancing lady. In this version, the dancing lady boss has a full suit instead of a skimpy cabaret outfit, and she shakes her head instead of her booty, unlike the other ports of the game, because of the children's appeal of the Famicom platform. There's actually some slowdown, but it's not as bad as some of the Gradius games, but you can tell that they are really pushing the Famicom hardware as far as it will go graphically. This game actually got a Western release, but only in Europe. However, Konami tweaked the PAL version to run fine at 50Hz, but if you play it on an American system, it runs too fast on NTSC hardware. This would not be a problem, however this version is frequently included in ROM carts and ROM collections because it's technically in English, but only the amount of English translated is on the title screen. If the only way they've played this game is a European ROM running on an American hardware, then you haven't been playing it correctly, and the game is much harder because it moves too fast. Here is how the introductory jingle sounds on the PAL ROM running on an NTSC system. And here's how it sounds correctly. The 1980s Konami was great at making their games creative and fun, but they didn't give a rip about making their games quite difficult. The game falls into some of the similar difficulty trappings of the Gradius series, in that the game was much easier when you're powered up, but if you are shot down, getting back to a powered up state is very difficult, so failure is punished with greater difficulty. However, there are limited continues, and you have the option to change the difficulty level with each continue, as well as your character. By the way, the regular Konami code does not work. The PAL version of the game has a modified Konami code. If the Japanese version has one, I have not been able to find it. So if you actually know of a working Konami code for the Japanese Famicom version of Parodius, do let me know. Seriously.
Parodius が出たぞ。
まだ売っとらんよ。いつも早とちりのタコであった。ちっちゃなかシューティング。
パロディウスだ。
もうすぐ発売。
Konami.
Parodius Da for Famicom is a gem. It is a time capsule from an era when the 8-bit Famicom ruled the market dominance in Japan, but more powerful arcade hardware and 16-bit systems showed what were possible. Despite the technical limitations, Parodius Da punches above its weight class and delivers a ton of cute-em-up shooting fun. The only thing more ridiculous than the Parodius games is the fact that Konami kept them mostly in Japan. I guess Konami of America was too busy counting all that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle money. Now, on to our third game of the video. Fun fact, Suntory Beer had a commercial campaign in the 1980s with an animated cartoon penguin that resembled Penta, but was not actually Penta. These had nostalgia, smoking, drinking, and were all sorts of awesome. The link to the video is in the video description.
思い出だけでは生きていけない。缶ビールください。サントリー缶ビール。
I struggle to find good reasons why Konami of America never localized and sold the first two games in this video, but moving on to our next game, the reason that they thought this game would be best to keep in Japan is all too obvious. Yume Penguin Monogatari, Story of the Dream Penguin, was released on January 25th, 1991, and is a hybrid platformer shoot-'em-up game. It stars Penta the Penguin and his problematic pound predicament. In this game, you play Penta, who is quite round, fat, rotund, and obese, and he just can't control himself and will constantly shove food in his mouth. Girlfriend Penko confronts him and issues an ultimatum that he needs to lose the weight or she's going to dump him for an evil hipster penguin Chad with an evil pointed guy sunglasses. Hipster evil penguin Chad, this is what I'm just going to be calling him, has stolen all the weight loss energy drinks named Fat Be Gone with the help of his cartoon minions. It alternates between a side-scrolling cartoon platform game and shoot-'em-up levels in a cute cartoon jet plane. In the platform levels, Penta must kick, jump, and pound his way through the levels, all while the cartoon minions of Chad will throw apples and other foods at him. If he is hit, he will reflexively eat the apple and his fat gauge will go up. If his fat gauge gets too high, he will shape down and become a heckin' chonker that will move slow and have a hard time getting through the already tough stages. It is a bullet hell platformer game, but with apples that instantly make you fat. Oh, and falling in the water or getting hit by a minion will also make you instantly fat, for no known reason. All Konami games in the 1980s and 90s, once you start taking damage, you are punished for it, and your chance of getting through the level quickly disintegrates. It's the Gradius difficulty curve, because your anxiety will shoot up once you realize that you're taking damage, and that you're going to greatly reduce your chances of getting through that particular level. Now, the real villain of the game is Penko, because of her demanding, unrealistic body demands for her would-be lover is cruel and the source of strife in this game. Penko the Penguin rejects our pound-heavy protagonist. The game is cute and cartoony, but it is also deliberately cruel and heartbreaking. Not only do you have to get through the level and defeat the bad guys and the boss, but you have to do it under an arbitrary weight limit, and if you take too long to get in shape, Penko will lose her patience and will call you up and dump you on the spot once your sloth and girth are determined irredeemable in her judgment-pencil eyes. In the phone calls in between the levels, she will alternate between encouraging Penta to keep at it and taunting him that he is still too fat. The graphics are cute, colorful, and overall, it is a well-made, fun, tough, and completely insane time. Or in other words, a Famicom Konami game of the Showa era. This game has been getting up there in price, but it's still worth looking into. It is one hell of an emotionally abusive cartoon Konami ride. July 15th will mark the 40th anniversary of the Nintendo Famicom being released. It still brings me joy to discover new-to-me games among the thousands of games released in the 1980s and 90s. Stay tuned to hear about more of them. Like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. This has been 8-bit Joystick. Stay awesome, play retro. And subscribe. subscribe for more videos. This has been 8-bit joystick. Stay awesome, play retro. Oh, my cat! Hey, cat. Did you know that July 15th, 2023 will mark the 40th anniversary of Nintendo Famicom being released? It still brings me joy to discover new-to-me games among the thousands of games released in the 1980s and 90s. Stay tuned to hear more about them. Like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. Stay awesome, play retro. Did you just bite my hand? Yeah, he did.